This episode of Capes and Lunatics is brought to you by Tweaked Audio. Get awesome headphones, go to tweakedaudio.com and use the coupon code Southgate to get 30% off, free shipping, and a lifetime warranty. Or you can get there through the link on our website, southgatemediagroup.com.
Avast me hearties and welcome once again to Full Stream Ahead. I'm your captain, Charlie, the Professor Esser. With me as always is me first mate and skinny rich friend.
Yeah, it's Mozz.
Welcome, Mozz. All right. Tonight's episode, The Boys, Season 2, Episode 7, Butcher Baker, Candlestick Maker. To help Victoria Newman make a case against Vought, Mallory and the boys look to an unlikely source for answers. Huey gets terrifying news about Starlight. Meanwhile, Homelander and Storefront further their master plan for Compound V. Our director this evening is Stefan Schwartz. Keg Rosenberg and Eric Kripke get our developed by credits. Of course, this is based on the work of Garth Ennis and Eric Robertson, and of course Eric Kripke gets our developed by credit. All right, let's see here. So many things going on here. And that is the thing about these last two. There's so much going on, so much to tell.
I feel like they address all of it.
They do.
Like narrative threads were started with intent and they were finished with intent.
Yeah, so for those who don't recall, last episode we ended off with basically Lamplighter. We basically find out that Lamplighter was not acting on orders when he killed Mallory's kids. That he basically decided to go take Mallory out on his own, and accidentally murdered her children or her grandchildren. And it's just and he's basically lived with this since then, and he has agreed to testify against Vought. The only problem is that, it's great that he wants to do this, but he's not as sympathetic of a witness as they would like. And, which I think is an interesting thing. It is an interesting thing to go this route. But
which route?
Well, I mean, just this idea that he'll testify, but is he a good enough witness? And I think I it's like after you see the next episode, you're like, was that kind of a foreshadowing thing that we were supposed to get there?
I don't think so. I mean, I could see it being a plausible thing to be so concerned with covering, your back door that you want to make it certain that you can't be denied on this thing, and being very worried that slippery characters like this always have a back door.
Yeah, and of course, let's face it, it's a arguably disgruntled Vought employee who basically committed a major felony. So right. I can see that.
With as much as they have, tried to use the media as a character in this show, I think that it's a perfectly plausible thing to think that narrative that they are building could carry, and if they can get enough people behind it, anything is possible right now. The mob rules at this moment.
Yeah. And we do see that, the mob does rule, because and again, among all of the threads, we've got, which I think is what we're kind of opening on here, is one of Stormfront's followers, who is, again, and this is something I had made mention about this intentionally using someone who is not the Aryan ideal to be obsessed with the Aryan ideal.
Right.
You know, because of course, you know, here we have this, you know, this dark-eyed, dark-haired man, definitely not in shape, but so being pulled into this rhetoric. Although, to be fair, it does not necessarily seem to be that he's being pulled into a white supremacist rhetoric so much as just a fear of the soups rhetoric.
Right, and I think a bit of that is something you see in any sort of ideology sweeping people up into this sense of righteousness, this sense of validation that has been held back and tamped down for so long, and finally to know that everything you see around you, all the bad things, are not, you know, your shortcomings, but they are the rough patch through which you prove your devotion to some weird ideal. It's a way of finding purpose in the disarray of their life.
Yeah, and I think that is true of all of this. But I do find that the superhuman aspect of it is an interesting thing to look at, both in the context of a lot of fiction, and of course the X-Men spring to mind, where everyone always wants to bring up, why is it different that the Fantastic Four got their powers from a rocket ship, and these guys were just born with that mutants are just born with the power. And what it is this kind of interesting difference of that I think you kind of get exemplified here, which is this idea that the Vought heroes, arguably, are made to be heroes. So when you're Captain America, when you're Reed Richards and the Fantastic Four, you're going up in that rocket ship, you're being a hero. You know, even if you actually weren't a hero, they actually stole the rocket ship and all this kind of stuff. But, you know, there's always this idea of someone who is in some way or another authorized into this position. And then someone else just randomly has these powers, and we don't know what they're going to do with them, and that's what's scary. And I think that's sort of this idea that
it's also if somebody got their powers, you know, from a part of the universe, that's something that we can wrap our heads around. That's something that we can control. That is perhaps something that we can replicate. If we can replicate, we can claim mastery over it or claim ownership of that ability. But if it comes from innate, it comes from the universe, it comes from a place where you can't touch, it just bestows its powers upon somebody, and it chooses in a manner that you aren't able to grasp or control. That's the difference. And I think one makes people feel much, much more terrified and uneasy.
Yeah, and, you know, and along these same lines, it goes into this thing that what you do see in white supremacist literature and hate literature throughout the ages. In fact, you also see it in sort of the counter flip to it too, in certain other any group that wants to say they are the victims of the Great Conspiracy will always lay supernatural elements at the feet of whoever they're going to victimize. So whether it is the bestial sexual attraction of the other, or the conspiratorial blood rituals of the other, these are these things that are inherent in it, even if on a day-to-day basis people push back against the idea. In the back of their minds, underneath all of this rhetoric, there is this quality. I mean, that's one of the aspects of the QAnon view. It's not just that there's an evil group of elites, but they're utilizing satanic rituals to do something. You know, it's not bad enough that, they're rich and they're powerful and they're controlling the media. Also, they're eating babies because that gives them power. It's like, you know, you'd think that would be the bridge too far, but weirdly enough, in this
that becomes the weird thing about groups like that there is never a bridge too far. If the movement to which you have given the right to define your identity, you've given that right over to the group now. Now, whatever the group does, you can't possibly question it any longer. So it becomes this weird almost an oxymoronic situation where even if you don't believe in it, you have to claim to, because the movement, the group, who has claimed right over defining your identity, is saying something. So if you say something's wrong about that, you say something is wrong with me, and nobody's willing to even consider that possibility ever, even for a moment.
Mm-hmm. And what I think is interesting in this idea that when we talk about that bridge too far in the real world, we reject it because it is a bridge too far to the rational mind. In this universe, though, yeah, people do fly. It's like all of this magic is demonstrably real,
right,
even if we don't understand it. And now it's being randomly distributed to the others. And of course, what is inherent in that fear is it has not come to me. And you can put it into this very interesting quality in that sense that, and you can think about this in the way that all populist movements can sometimes take on this kind of view, which is one of the reasons why I'm always very skeptical of all populism, whether it is, socialism or fascism. I can see how quickly people are ready to go to the guillotines, and every time people get to that level, I'm like, hey, let's slow this down. But the idea is that we live in a world where there is this superpower called money, and some people have this superpower called money, and we don't know why we don't have that superpower. And it makes us want to hurt the people who have the money. And sometimes those people with money are actually demonstrably evil people, which doesn't help the case.
Right.
So and that's your basic problem with the supervillains in this story, is that there are supervillains. Now, granted, in this story, the supervillains are created by Homelander. The supervillains are just other people who have these powers and may, in fact, be actual superheroes in their own right, Which is that other complex question in this, that's it's an interesting thing, of course, being a kid who grew up during the Cold War and, grew up with Russian supervillains. And then after the fall of the Soviet Union, suddenly these guys weren't supervillains anymore. Suddenly they were just the guys defending their way of life. So it gets very interesting and complex whenever you want to deal with that. But this is just like 5-second set of scenes, but it says so much, and there's so much you can analyze and dissect from this, and that is the point. And of course, what the real point of this is the guy, the Stormfront follower, sees this guy at the convenience store. The light from the sun hits the guy's eyes and makes them glow a bit. And that freaks him out. And then the next day he comes there, asks if he's a supervillain, and then shoots him. And then we see later Stormfront and Homelander.
There's a moment. There's the moment right after he shoots him. What do you think was in his eyes? Did he recognize that? Oh man, did the reality finally hit him that maybe I did something bad or wrong?
Oh yeah,
no. Or do you think there was no even that thought never entered his mind?
No, I think, and this is what I was going to get to, is I think he knows he did wrong. And this is sort of what I've said about Kyle Rittenhouse, He had this image of what this moment was going to be.
Right.
And the minute he's in it, suddenly it's nothing like he thought it was going to be. And, this is the thing I always say about, you can always tell, like, a veteran who's seen war never talks about war.
Right.
If you've actually been in war, you don't talk about war. You talk about a lot of stuff because you talk about you talk about basic, and you talk about the friends, and you talk about these things. But when you actually get to that, it's almost never that you'll be sitting there talking to a vet and they're going to start telling you about what the actual war was.
Yeah.
In fact, they actually do, either they're really well adjusted or they're about to go nuts, or they're lying. And it's usually the third option when someone is, because it is such a thing to take a human life.
And it's not something I don't think most people can understand. So they don't possess the language or the lexicon to be able to interpret those feelings. We don't have words for them. So why bother trying to have a conversation that one person is completely ill-equipped to handle?
Mm-hmm. And exactly, and that's the thing. And in this moment, the guy kills this guy, and he's probably thinking he probably wasn't a supervillain, because shouldn't he have? Well, because he says, "Are you bulletproof? Are you bulletproof?" You know, which is also such an interesting question to ask, because what if he said yes?
Right.
What do you do now?
Right. Or was that way sort of his last bit of humanity clawing back against this decision, going, what if he's not bulletproof? What if he's not, was there that sense of doubt? Or was he so lost in the zeal of the moment that he was so excited that he was about to do something for the good of the cause?
Yeah.
Which do you think it was in that moment?
Yeah, I think it was when he's asking him, are you bulletproof? It's him lost in the zeal of the cause.
Gotcha. Interesting.
You know, because obviously, if he is bulletproof, then he's got to find another way.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
It's like when they're battling translucent, you know, and you got to stick the electricity up his butt, you know, which ironically, Deadpool then stole later for the Juggernaut. But as it stands, it's just an interesting thing. And then when we get to Stormfront and Homelander's rally, again, there is this thing about no one condones what happened, but we have to understand the very real threat of the supervillains. You know, which of course, again, the threat that Homelander himself created, a threat that Homelander himself is arguably a supervillain.
Right.
Because, you know, that's the thing, is like, it's not like any of this was Vought sanctioned. And that's sort of this interesting aspect of that we also get with the Lamplighter story. All of these things that the superheroes are doing, it's not sanctioned. That by and large, they would be so much happier if the superheroes just went out, they waved, they took out some bad guys, they kept the collateral damage to a minimum, they weren't out doing horrible things to people just to be petty or monstrous, and that would be so much better from Vought's perspective. You know, Vought's problem is that they don't, and that these superheroes are creatures they themselves cannot control.
See, that's interesting, because if they have been making superheroes since the 50s, right? Mm-hmm. How have they not gotten better at managing their powerful beings? You know, how have they not?
They have. I mean, arguably they have. I mean, look at Homelander. They do have him under control for the most part.
I know, but it's like this really, you know, it's not. It always feels like it's about to break apart. Like he's on the edge every time he encounters a confrontation or a situation that makes him, you know, say, why can't I just do what I want to do? He's so close to recognizing that he is the villain and that he wants to be the villain.
Well, you know, I mean, that's the thing. I actually think he never wants to be the villain. I think that that's an aspect that we see every so often when Stormfront's talking. Where you see this a lot more in the next episode. I have some things about some very interesting exchanges in the next episode, but it's just this thing where every time Stormfront shows a little bit too much of who she really is, you see Homelander just sort of like tense up a bit, because it's like, that's who we are, you know. Because even from Homelander's own perspective, that's the thing about Homelander in this universe. As far as we know, yes, Homelander has let people die. Yes, Homelander has murdered, in his mind, villains and you know, just rather regular criminals or super terrorists. This is not a Homelander who is sexually assaulting people. This is not a Homelander who is, you know, indiscriminately killing. He will let people die, and he does cause collateral damage when he's in pursuit. But in his mind, he still sees himself as a hero.
That's interesting. I can see that.
Well, and I think that's the thing of it is it's an interesting idea here. It's like he is Superman in the sense that he does hold back all the time.
Wow.
And he always, what it is he's not happy about it, but he does not want to be the last being alive on Earth. And he does not want to be a super villainous despot. He just wants to do what he wants and have everyone tell him how great he is.
Yeah.
Going back to that superpower of money, much like Donald Trump. I don't think Donald Trump per se wants to hurt people. I think Donald Trump just wants to hear people shout his name and tell him how great he is. And if they
even that is merely a tool. It's not necessarily the end goal. The end goal is just to look out for himself as make as much money as possible. But whatever he has to do is part of the game, and to him there's no right or wrong in the game.
Mm-hmm. And again, it's about that superpower called money.
Yeah.
If he has the superpower called money, he knows he's safe and he can be strong and he can do what he wants. But, and for what it's worth, that's why it's so terrifying for him that his taxes will be revealed, that people will find out he does not have the money he says. He is so terrified of the fact that, he does not have, that he knows that he is wearing the emperor's new clothes.
Yeah, but do you think there's a measure of this idea that his supporters are so allegiant to him that it won't even matter? Like the old phrase from before he ever got elected, I could be on Fifth Avenue and I could shoot somebody in the face and I wouldn't lose a single voter.
You know what? And that is the myth that he sows.
But it's certainly true. Nothing has been able to or move his base even an inch away.
So, and what it comes down to, I mean, and this isn't a politics podcast, but what it comes down to is, which most rational, quote-unquote, rational Trump supporters will talk to, is they'll always say, what has he done? What is the thing he's done? Now, of course, I will point out, negligent homicide, kidnapping children, yada, yada, yada. These things that you can point to, but they will explain it in ways that are, like COVID. They'll say, look, no one could have anticipated COVID. You can't blame him for COVID, because even with clearly all of the other countries had problems with COVID too, so it's not like it's just his fault, which I think is just, it's making excuses for him. But at their heart of hearts, I think most people want to be rational and want to convince themselves that they are rational and want to convince themselves that they're not dating Stormfront, So in that sense, the Donald Trump electorate is Homelander. They want to do what they want, and it does make them uncomfortable when it looks too much like they're dating Stormfront. But they want to say, well, when she's like, it's not quite what it looks like. I know you think it is because you're just always going to have that knee-jerk reaction, but really this is our view of it. So, it's a crazy time to be alive. But anyway, let's get to the rest of the story, because there's so much more that happens in this story outside of just this amazing just the amazingness of the ongoing story of the boys and of our world in which the boys hit, which, talk about those perfectly timed things, and I think we've been really great we've had a lot of good artists who had a lot of prescient ideas that sort of got money at just the right time to make it all work out, to create some great art and to follow through to some pretty interesting ideas. But, we also, in this episode, basically everyone has their little jobs they have to do. But one of the things that we'll get to in a minute, but Butcher gets a call from his mom. Butcher gets called from his mom, tells him that his dad's dead, and to come see her. And we get this very interesting separate plot about Butcher going to see his mom, and his dad isn't dead, but he is very much dying because he's riddled with cancer and he's about to die. But he wants, his dad wants to see him, and his mom wants him to see his dad, so at least they can say goodbye once before the end. Because, as he says, he never got to say goodbye to Lenny, and it's like, not the thing to say because, but this is where we get the entire story beyond it, which is that, and Butcher's dad was an abusive father. He was a very stereotypical, make a man out of you, beat you till you're strong kind of guy. And in his mind, when he looks at Butcher, and Butcher's like, I could kill you right now. And he's like, go ahead, beat up an old crippled man, says, but you know what? And he makes this point. It's like, look, you say what you will, Lenny was weak, but you were strong. And now look at what you became because of me.
Right. It's like that Johnny Cash song.
That
name that made you strong.
Yeah, Boy Named Sue. Yeah. And for what it's worth, that eats at Butcher, because on one level he knows it's true. That if he he sort of like talks down about Lenny, and for as much love as he had and as much as he tried to protect Lenny, for him to say anything bad about Lenny really sets him off too. Like, you don't say his name. Yeah. And that is the crux of the biscuit. He does feel like this man does not deserve to talk about Lenny, but it's the complexity of it, about who you are and who that makes you. And that which parallels to our other story, which is Homelander and Stormfront meeting Ryan. And how, and again, this is Homelander really kind of being a sociopath, still really shucksing it, but like the dad with his new girlfriend, it's like, look, I know your mom means a lot to you, but this is my new girl, and she's going to be around a lot. I want you guys to meet each other and get to know each other. And there is this kind of, and again, like I said, this shucksness to it. And even in its own way, when Homelander confronts Rebecca about it,
right,
he says, I don't want, this isn't, this is how I was raised in this artificial.
Yeah, this was me.
Exactly. I want him to know what the world is. I don't want him to be so frightened the first time he's let out, I want him to be able to handle himself, which is an interesting bit of self-awareness from Homelander.
And like a little insight into the fact that he does mean well, and that he has emotions that are important to him, and he's willing to be sort of open with them in this moment about it. It's a very telling thing about him, and that he genuinely cares for Ryan.
Well, exactly, and I think it's a quality, when you say he genuinely cares for Ryan, I don't want to read too much into him, because, he is a sociopath. But what he sees in Ryan is someone else who's like him. He sees something he felt he would never see, which is an equal.
And for the first time, he's encountering these paternal feelings, and he's sort of like dipping his toe into the water and seeing what it feels like to be a dad. He's like, oh, this is an interesting feeling. I care about this kid. Hey, maybe I should fight for it. And this is probably kind of important. Hey, this is something that happened to me. So he's having a really personal journey with it. It's really interesting and fun to see.
Yeah, and, but at the same time, he has no interest in, in Ryan's little Lego animations,
Right.
Because, it's doing the blind side. It's its own controversial kind of film.
But I mean, at the same time, he could be looking at all those things and all those behaviors as evidence of him being held back, and evidence that his mother has sheltered him. So these are all sort of artifacts of that thing that he really hates that happened to him. So every one of those things is, oh, look at this kid. He's a superhero. He's a god, and look what he's being belittled to. He's building with blocks when he should be out there taking charge of his destiny. So it's not necessarily a blight against the act of playing with Legos, but maybe more an emotional reaction to what it means relative to what he could be.
Well, no, and along those same lines, it's his mom's movies. So he's getting the media that his mom likes. His mom likes The Blind Side, so he's going to watch The Blind Side. His mom likes this and that and the other, and so these are, so that's what he's exposed to. That's the world he knows. And, he's like, your dad's in films. He's in films? It's like, oh, yeah. It's like, oh, their films are PG. They're fine, And it is this idea, although I guess, you have that counter narrative in that, which is that raising this child, knowing that her child, could be Brightburn, in essence, there is this urge to not trigger him towards certain behaviors and to raise him to see the world in a much more benign way, instead of letting him get into this idea of being filled with anger and violence. Although, he's about to be a teenager, these are things that are going to be coming up,
And he's not going to be prepared for any of it.
Yeah, exactly. And we do see that basically the head of this comes to essentially Homelander flying Ryan up so that he sees that he doesn't live in a little house in the country. He lives in a fortified fortress, that everything is...
He doesn't live in the real world.
Exactly. And that gives him his falling out, and he goes to be off with, and that Homelander and
Stormfront, who says to Rebecca, when Rebecca says he needs to be with his mother, she turns around and says, such a cold line, too. She goes, oh, he'll still have a mother, as they fly off. I'm like, wow, that's intense. Yes. My word. What a bad night. Good Lord.
Yeah. Well, she is. She is who she is, and that is all who she is. Along these same lines, going back to families and mothers, we have Stormfront get captured. Starlight. Starlight get captured when she goes to meet with her mom. And her mom lets them know where she is. And that leads to Stormfront and... as they're preparing to give this presentation, or essentially what's happening is, so Lamplighter is under watch with Huey. Mallory and Mother's Milk go off to find to speak with someone else to get a corroboration for what Lamplighter is going to say, and then. Once they capture Starlight, you get a press conference with Homelander and Stormfront basically saying, Starlight has been captured, and
she was the mole.
Yeah. Is this also the episode where we have or is that last episode where Brave Maeve goes on a bender?
And has her threesome?
Yeah, actually, I think that was... Yeah.
That's this episode.
That
and
is
Ashley walks in on them.
Yeah.
That great moment where Ashley does, let the guard down and be a human being for a second. And I was like, oh, that's kind of neat.
Yeah. Well, Ashley is a human being, but she's also got a job to do. And we see that she's got this little bald spot on the back of her head now. So it has been a rough go. Huey and Starlight went to Brave Maeve last episode, right? Okay. When they were looking for someone to rat out Vought. Right?
I think that was this episode as well.
That was this episode too, man. How did they get all this story in here? Because there's like 6 things.
It's crazy. And they keep track of all these threads.
I know. I can barely do it, and I just watched the dang thing. Yeah. So that whole story, of course. Maeve's girlfriend leaves her because it's too crazy, and yada yada yada. She goes on a bender. They're trying to find someone else that can possibly corroborate Lamplighter's story, I guess,
or find any other witness to other aspects of, the case against Vought.
Yeah, because I'm trying to figure out how that worked. So Huey and Starlight must have gone out at the start of the episode, and then Starlight gets captured. Anyway. Long story short, Huey and Lamplighter realize they have to go save Starlight because she's been captured. And we also find out that, Lamplighter, that they never took him out of the database, which is kind of weird when you think about it, but also, honestly, just sounds like basic corporate failure.
Right, the failure of bureaucracy, yeah.
Yeah, well, because the idea is, he's still active in Vought.
Right, and he's still relatively considered an asset. He's not a liability yet.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So he can sneak in, and he says, him and the Deep used to sneak college girls up in here, up this way, because, they're just delightful. And it gets to this thing where you realize that Lamplighter is actually doing this because he wants to commit suicide.
Yeah.
That, he doesn't tell Huey what his plan is, and I don't know if his plan was ever actually to save Starlight. We do see that Starlight is in a special area, and, they know her powers because she can't use any electricity powers. It's like a bioluminescent kind of thing. You see the little glow sticks is all that's giving her light in there. Yeah. So that's,
no electricity anywhere nearby.
Exactly. That's how they're controlling her. But, of course, once Lamplighter does what he does, because this goes into this thing that Lamplighter, he says he was a prodigy. He burned down his house when he was 10. And, his dad was so proud that he just wanted to make his dad proud. And he basically emulates himself. Which, again, goes to the idea that he can control the flame and he can augment the flame, make the flame more powerful. And this triggers all the fire alarms, and that does create light to shine through as the warning lights from the outside start blaring. And that is enough for her to pull on the electricity from those lights to blast her way out. You also have in that Huey, completely dumbfounded because he's like, why did he do that? And he realizes he needs his hand, and we see him basically curb stomp the wrist. Just so hardcore, which is one of these things about Huey where you realize, man, Huey can be hardcore when he needs to be.
Right. He won't take unnecessary risks, but when it comes time to make it count, he's there. He will show up.
Yeah. And he gets there. He steals the hand. He goes. He's looking for Starlight. Finds her mom. Frees her mom. Starlight has already freed herself. Then they all get together. They go to escape, and then of course Black Noir shows up and starts, fighting Starlight and basically beating her up. And really, again, this is the part where, again, I always feel like this. Black Noir as Deadpool is something that I am so enamored of in my head. And throughout this fight, that he is able to, he's actually more than Deadpool. He's like a cross between Deadpool and someone with actual superhuman strength. So, because he's really able to toss her around and smash her through marble and all these kinds of things. And then, of course, Maeve shows up and saves him.
Shows how strong Maeve is.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is Maeve is the equivalent. Is probably as strong as Homelander, but, not... She can't fly, It's like she can't fly. She doesn't have laser vision. And probably the lasers would burn her a bit more than they do Stormfront, although we'll get to that a bit next episode too.
But I'd be really fascinated to see her come into her own next season, to really just like be the powerful superhero that she is. Because she's so jaded by everything and so caught up in her own problems that she just doesn't have the will to be that anymore.
Yeah. Anyway, we find out that basically Black Noir's one weakness is he's a nut allergy. So once again, Almond Joy saved the day. And that certainly was foreshadowing.
Yeah, who's laughing now?
Because if you remember
right, because he said it was the worst candy bar in the world.
No. But when Black Noir has the person find Butcher for him, like 2 episodes ago, she offers him an Almond Joy, and he like holds up the trash can. Makes her throw it away. And we just think that he's just saying, get to work, and it seems so cold and cruel. But really, it's like, no, I'm allergic to nuts. I really don't want you eating the nuts and breathing them around me because, it's a very Deadpool-y thing to have happen there. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that's true. Very true.
Anyway, trying to think of. Yes, okay.
And then we have the Deep and A-Train.
Oh, the Deep and A-Train.
Having their little conversation with the leader of the cult.
Oh yeah, because as we see, Eagle the Archer is out.
Yeah.
And again, it's weird that one moment he's like the acolyte, but then it's sort of like this idea that now we have a new superhero and we don't need you anymore. And because he speaks ill of the program releases stuff about him, which is that he's apparently a furry.
Right, and all because they wanted him to stop talking to his mom, I think, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, they didn't want him. They wanted him to cut his mom out of it because, that she wasn't part of the Church of the Collective. Which is sad, and they say that is what goes on with Scientology, but I don't know anything about that. Anyway,
and then of course we get the amazing scene at the courthouse.
Well, yeah, that's the other thing that we want to get to, because the context of that is that Mallory and Mother's Milk visit Vogel. Vogel says he won't do it because he has a family, and he's afraid of what Vought will do to his family. And then at the end of it, after Butcher deals with his dad, basically goes to Vogel's house to meet with him as well. And again, why does this guy keep letting these people into his house? Tell him it's Butcher. Oh, okay, let him in. Let's see what he has to say.
It's also like the threat of, oh, God, if there's a situation brewing, maybe I have a chance to have a hand in controlling it. Otherwise, it's going to fly into the wind, and then I'm going to have to deal with, a situation that I'm not even aware of. So, exactly. Fine.
And basically, in this moment, he uses essentially his argument for why he won't testify is now the argument why he will testify. Because he basically says, you're going to testify, or I'm going to kill your daughter, and I'm going to kill your sons, and I'm going to make sure they're all dead. And you know what? No one's going to stop me. I've been dodging the soups and Voughts this long, and now I have a mission to do. You do this for us, and we'll take it, and and I won't. So we get this moment, because now also, that's right, because now also, because Lamplighter is dead, they no longer have a witness, so they have to get a new witness. So they get. That's right. Is that how we get to I am just so. Yeah. Okay. No, that's not how we get to Maeve. But because we go to Maeve first because they don't think it's enough, or I don't know. Anyway, long story short, Vogel comes in to testify before Congress. And then, much like the FBI agent who, when they first are approaching about the soup terrorist, has her head explode, suddenly Vogel's head explodes.
Right.
Then a bunch of other random people's heads explode, including, interestingly enough, what's his name? Not A-Train's replacement. I'm forgetting his name, but yeah, his head blows up too. And
right. He wasn't fast enough for that.
No, well, guess he didn't see that coming. But it's an interesting, because, and this was how we ended. It's like everybody's head's exploding. No one knows who it's going to be. The Congresswoman's chief of staff head explodes.
But why not Homelander or Stormfront? I mean, I know they're superheroes, but like they're still slaves to the whims of physics, right?
I mean, well, I think, as we'll see when we get to the next episode, I think everyone who was killed for a reason.
Right.
Because I do think that the person who did the killing was working their own agenda.
Or working for Vought, because the only people that have ever had their heads pop are ones that were planning to testify against Vought, or had maybe an inkling of an idea of what Vought was actually up to.
Except that, again, A-Train's rival gets hit. And the question, and this is something that we get into when we talk about A-Train and the Deep and the Church, which is the Deep gets to come in. Because we also get that very great scene with Edgar in the head of the church. I don't drink Fresca, you know. Horrible stuff, that. And they basically make the point that we can't have A-Train on the team, you know, because he says, you know, I've got too much pushback from Stormfront about A-Train. And... you know, and of course he's like, you know, I think you know why. As I understand, she was one of your father's first associates, you know, and it's like
he literally says, "What's her problem with A-Train?" It's like, come on, let's not play this game.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, and that's where they make again to A-Train, letting A-Train know what the problem is, and again, this goes into this idea of pieces moving on a chessboard. And pieces that result in perhaps someone else's agenda that, you know, I think there's so much more going on right now, and like the last episode just gets us to this. So let's call it a night here, Mozzie, because we got so much to talk about on the next episode.
Indeed.
But in the meantime, any final thought for tonight, Mozz?
No, I think we got to it pretty good.
Okay, I'm sorry. What'd you say, Mozz?
Oh, I said no. I think we got to it pretty good.
I'm sorry. Can you say that one more time?
I said I think we got to it pretty good.
Oh, there you go. You see, Mozz, you know, sometimes I use these very cheap headphones I get at the dollar store. They're not good headphones, and you know, I keep on telling myself I got to go down to tweakedaudio.com. Yes, sponsor time. I can go down to tweakedaudio.com, get some really high quality headphones, use the coupon code Southgate to get a discount on them, and be able to understand what people are saying on these podcasts I love so much. Likewise, here's a fun fact. You know that coupon code I said to use for tweakedaudio.com, Southgate? You can use that same coupon code again over at hunterkiller.com. You can help Michelle Grace solve a cold case, get what amounts to an escape room delivered to your house. It's a lot of fun. Play with your friends, play with your family, play by yourself. Challenge yourself and use that coupon code Southgate to get a discount on it. Likewise, if none of that interests you, go down to our show notes, click on the Amazon link, go to Amazon.com, buy whatever you want. Costs you nothing, helps out the show. It's always a good thing. And while you're there, check out Pod Life, the book written by and for podcasters from the Southgate Media Group, lets you know what they think and what they feel and why they podcast. It's currently available in paperback and in a digital download, and coming soon, so the rumors say, an audiobook. Mm-hmm. If anyone does any of these things, or they just want to talk to you about something, Mozz, how can they find you?
Oh, they can email me at mozzmanzor@gmail.com or find me on Facebook under Mozz Manzor. That's Mozzz. MANZOOR.
And, of course, you can always write to me that old-fashioned email way the way our Mozz and Paz once did on the internets at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog, all one word, @gmail.com. And, of course, follow me on the Twitters. I live tweet, though I missed it this Monday. Mondays at 7 o'clock. DuckTales, woohoo! New season, the Disney Afternooniverse is coming to life. You don't want to miss it, and you can follow me as I live tweet it as lots of crazy shenanigans occurs. And that's at Charlie Esser. That's CharlieEsser. Look for the 2 E's in the middle.
For quality. Bing!
Thank you, Mozz. All right, me hearties. Once again, we've sailed these shiny seas of streaming content. We've survived it, and we'll disembark now. But come up the gangplank again next week as we once again sail full stream ahead. Arr.
Arr.